Hey everyone, my name is Penny Zanker, and it's time to reset. This podcast goes beyond just navigating change. It's about new ways of thinking about how you can approach challenges, how you can shift your mindset when needed, create some space and grace for yourself so that you can rethink, recharge, and reprioritize when and where needed. Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Thank you for hitting play and sharing this next episode with me. It's time to reset. Hello, and welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zanker, and I'm your host. And I'm always looking for people on this show that are going to challenge you to think a little bit differently. Because when we start to take some time to think, that's when we're going to work smarter instead of just doing things the way that we've always done them. So Maggie Jackson is here with us today, and she is definitely going to give us something to think about. She's an award-winning author and journalist with a global reach. Her book, Uncertain: The Wisdom and Wonder of Being Unsure, explores why we should seek not knowing in times of flux. And she's been nominated for a National Book Award and named to 3 best books of 2023 lists. And basically, Uncertain has been lauded as incisive and timely triumphant by Dan Pink, and surprising and practical by Gretchen Rubin, and remarkable and persuasive by the Library Journal. And this acclaimed book, sparked global conversation on the steep costs of fragmenting our attention. So she's written a couple of fantastic books, and I could read on and on about all of her accolades. She's written for the New York Times and many other publications. And without further ado, Maggie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. Great to be here.
So it's good to be uncertain, is what you're saying. In uncertain times, be uncertain. Is that what you're saying?
Right. No, exactly. I mean, uncertainty is highly related to curiosity, to resilience, to adaptability, creativity. I mean, these are exactly the kind of skills that we need when life is unpredictable. So as volatility rises and precarity and erratic weather patterns, et cetera, we're living in a more unpredictable world. But that is precisely the time when we shouldn't be retreating into certainty, the kind of closed-mindedness of certainty. And I think uncertainty itself, being unsure, gets a very bad rap. And the science now shows that's a mistaken assumption. And uncertainty is not related to weakness. It is not related to inertia. Precisely the opposite.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, but I think, tell me if I'm wrong, that it's our nature to crave certainty, to feel secure, right? If you looked at the hierarchy of needs, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's secure the certainty of where we're going to get our food and the safety and so forth. So is that why we cling in uncertain times to certainty?
Well, there are a lot of different reasons, but yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, basically, humans are born to need and want answers. Uncertainty is not the end goal. We would not want to linger in irresolution and inertia, in indecision. That's not the end goal. But basically, we need and want and should want to get to the better answer, in not the first answer. That, in a nutshell, is what uncertainty gives us. Uncertainty opens up the space between question and answer so that you can actually get to the better solution. And so one of the most important starting points for understanding uncertainty, for the new science of uncertainty, is to understand that it starts with unease. What you were describing with, we need answers, particularly in a time when we're very outcome focused and very efficiency focused and wanting to rush to just get the fast fix and things like that. It starts with unease because we get uneasy when we're uncertain. But the most interesting, I think, aspect of the new science of uncertainty shows us that actually this unease is a benefit. It's a gift, because uncertainty is really good stress. When you meet up with something new, it could be a traffic jam, it could be a memo from your boss about an M&A, whatever. When you meet up with something new or ambiguous, your body and brain and naturally spring into action. You're going to react, to respond. And what happens is your heart might beat and your cortisol levels might rise. We know those sort of symptoms, but new discoveries are finding that there are incredible neural changes in the brain. Your brain actually becomes more receptive to new data. Your working memory is bolstered when you're uncertain, and your focus is widened and improved. Scientists call this curious eyes. So it's actually the moment, as one neuroscientist told me, that the brain is telling itself there's something to be learned here. I call it a kind of wakefulness, actually. And so
Wow.
one of the first ways in which we can harness this uncertainty, and by the way, I'll just add that the reason your body and brain are jumping into action is because basically you're being moved from the autopilot of our days when your expectations are that things are familiar, hit something new, and your brain is actually moving you toward updating your view of the world, updating your understanding of the world. So it's really a pivotal time that we shouldn't squander. And so one of the first ways in which we can work smarter is to listen to uncertainty as a signal, not fall into the mindset of, oh, I don't know here. I'm not sure here. I'm inadequate. Or I really have to get this answer, etc. No, we can't fall into those traps, those
Or
mental
fear.
traps.
I think more it's fear for people is I don't know what's coming and therefore I feel it or it makes me uncomfortable versus I just wanted to come back before we go into some of those points because I think those are fantastic. I'm sitting here taking notes because I love what you're saying. So I'm writing a lot of things down. So I love that you pointed out because I think also it's just a quick reframe for people to think we've got it all wrong, that there's nothing to fear, that it's to embrace, that when we are uncertain, what I'm hearing you say is that we're attentive and ready. And that's exactly what we need because we are so not attentive and ready today because of, like what you said, this autopilot of just doing things the way we've always done it or the constant level of distraction. We can block those out and really sort of dance in this uncertainty. We're going to really get more out of it. So I'm loving that right there.
Yeah, no, it's really a very big pivot on what we think of uncertainty. And I think that it's a huge mistake to basically think of this unease as something to retreat from. Think of it as a sign that you're not doing well. It's actually, this is, as I said, good stress. And one little wonderful story that illustrates this, there was a study not long ago, award-winning, now classic study of CEOs in Europe. The researchers went over to Europe because the European Union was expanding, actually doubling in size. So it was a time of tremendous uncertainty, a tremendous unpredictability in the marketplace. And so they did a longitudinal study and asked CEOs, what did you think would happen? And there was a group that said, oh, this will be great for my companies. And another portion of CEOs said, this is going to be terrible, really disaster for my company. But then to the researchers' actual surprise, there was a third group, the ambivalent CEOs, who said, well, I'm not sure. This could be good, it could be bad. And a year later, when the researchers returned, it was the ambivalent CEOs who had been more resourceful. They were inventive. They went out there and maybe set up a new factory in Central Europe or what have you. Mm-hmm. They also were more inclusive, very important. They actually looked for multiple possibilities and they heard multiple perspectives. And that's the kind of, and the CEOs who had, when sure of the way, actually did nothing or stuck to the status quo. So uncertainty spurs us, it provokes us to get to the edge of what we know and to admit that, and then to operate in that space where we really need to, as you say, wake up and start investigate. It really is an invitation to learn.
Yeah, that's awesome. And in my new language, because my new book is coming out in September, I talk about reset moments. So I think that moment that you are listening for that signal that this is feeling uncertain, that's a reset moment to say, let's step back and get some perspective and be open to where this can take us so that we can align around what we do next. So I love that because those being able to know what we're listening for. So you said, so listen for uncertainty as a signal. So how do we know? Like, how would you know that, okay, the marketplace is all over the place? Or what are some other signals that help us to know that we're feeling uncertain? Because sometimes we can't name what we're feeling.
Right, exactly. Well, I think if you feel as there are choices, if you feel as though it could be this way, the language I use is it could be this way, it could be that way. To use a more homebound example, if your kid wakes up with a cold and you think, is it spring allergies or is it COVID? Your mind does actually reach for possibilities when you're under
Mm-hmm.
stress. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think if you're flat out fearing the unknown, which is another entire physiological response. And in that time, if you're fearing what's going on, actually your circulatory system begins to shift blood and energy, glucose, et cetera, away from the extremities, including the brain. So that's the time when we're frozen, if we're fearing the unknown. Whereas if you're unsure, you're actually, I wonder if, or maybe it could be that, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one way to recognize it and to recognize the difference between fear and the good stress of uncertainty. It's also really interesting to note that we can lean into uncertainty. So is this all automatic? I talked about the heartbeat and cortisol levels. Well, some of it is, your physiological reactions you can't really do that much about, but basically this cascading effect of the stress of uncertainty is something that we can actually lean into. Now, what do I mean by that? In studies in learning and dynamic environments, the people who were stressed when the situation was most unpredictable, when the rules changed, or when they really just didn't know what was coming, or etc., those were the people who actually were more accurate, better performers. So you can lean in by recognizing that uncertainty is a signal and it's good stress. You can also lean in by, I kind of think of it as rolling up your cognitive shirt sleeves by knowing one of the stress hormones that's released when you're uncertain is norepinephrine, and that's actually related to cognitive effort. So you can think to yourself, wow, the rules just changed, or my client is on the verge of quitting, or the marketplace is going haywire in the stocks or whatever. At that moment, you can recognize, and uncertainty is all about keeping your head and harnessing the moment. You can recognize that this is the time you all are going to feel a little stressed. In fact, you need to lean into it, not retreat from it. That's really going to help you out.
So I love one of the things I pulled out of that. You talked about choices, and our mind goes into like scenarios of what it could be. So I pulled out some of those potential reset moments, those moments to recognize. So if a client quits, if rules change, if staff is reduced and you have a limited resource. And then you also said choices. If we feel like we don't have any choices, I feel like that's a really good time also to reset and to challenge the uncertainty, because we always have more choices, right? It tells you that we're narrowed in our thinking and that we're choosing fight, flight, or freeze. And I like now that we have a fourth option, which is focus, right? So
Yeah.
with
Or being
uncertainty,
unsure. Yeah.
well, you said it widens our focus.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Curious
So,
eye.
so in a way, it's the reaction of what's happening is we're either fighting it, fight, flight, or freeze, or focus, or allow, lean in and widen our focus. So, and it's another F word. So that works with the four Fs of stress and uncertainty, right?
Yeah. And also, it's really interesting that this kind of uncertainty is very related to curiosity. In fact, there are personality measurements about the curious persona. It's a very new field of studies. Curious people tend to read difficult books, or they tend to ask difficult questions, et cetera. But one of the pillars of the curious person who's actively curious, not just sort of armchair curiosity, but actually actively curious and works with their curiosity, explores, et cetera. The pillar of that is the ability to handle the stress of the unknown. And so, in other words, they know it is awkward to ask the difficult question in the meeting. They know that it is actually sometimes difficult to see art which disturbs you, or a movie, et cetera. But they're the people who do it anyway. They go forth into it. That's active curiosity, and it has a lot to do with harnessing that good stress, or being, and I wouldn't want to even use the word comfortable. This is not actually about comfort. It's actually about challenge, being willing to challenge yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's be those types of people that I call that they have a reset mindset, that they kind of live in that readiness space, ready to pivot, to be challenged, to challenge others, and use that as a dynamic reassessment of and constantly being in that place of, I haven't used the word curiosity, but I do believe that that would be a trait of somebody who has that type of mindset. What
Mm-hmm.
would you like just hearing those words? I'm just curious with your scientific background and all the writing that you did. How would just hearing the words like reset mindset, what would that mean to you in your world?
Well, I think that as well as waking up to the fact that the world has changed, the world is dynamic, that there are broken expectations, I think going hand in hand with that, and this has everything again to do with uncertainty, is the fact that you are setting forth from what you know. Your expectations are broken. In fact, scientists call this the prediction error. That's the code word sort of for the new, the murky, whatever you're being
Mm-hmm.
confronted with, or whatever you're seeking. You know, we're talking about two different things. One is surprises that hit you, but also surprises you seek, which is the nature of innovation. So I think it's really important to understand that one of the most important aspects of all that I'm talking about is that being unsure actually is moving you away from the familiar and the routine. That's a cardinal rule of creativity, of curiosity, of inventive thinking, and even of good problem solving. We have to just get
Mm-hmm.
unstuck from what is familiar. And one way we can do that, we can see this, the second kind of main importance pillar of uncertainty is the fact that it's not just a spur, a provocation to wake us up, but it's also a space of possibilities. So uncertainty by its nature is a time and space. It actually is the space between question and answer. It allows us to expand that space, not to rush to outcome, not to leap to judgment. I like to think of it as, what if we had a car which only ran on one speed or had no brakes? I mean, that car would be highly unable to adapt to the road and the landscape, et cetera. Well, rushing to answers is kind of like that car. The fix it mentality sets us back. So by being uncertain, you not only are waking up to the world, but you're also inviting yourself to inhabit, maybe even for just a couple moments, a space of possibilities. And we can see this with experts. The traditional definition of an expert is they've crewed the 10,000 hours, they know just what
Right.
to do. That's our image of what an expert is, the surgeon who walks into the room and knows what to do, et cetera. But this kind of expertise, which we've really put on a pedestal, is actually only works in benign, predictable environments because those knowing just what to do is based, again, on the mental models of what's worked in the past. So these so-called routine experts tend to fail in the new, unpredictable environments. What we need to be is adaptive experts. They're the ones who know when and how to be unsure. For instance, adaptive experts, this is really new science, are actually spend more time diagnosing a problem than even novices do. And this is across many, many disciplines, from everything from chess to finance to et cetera. And routine experts, actually years of experience, again, across disciplines, is not correlated or weakly correlated with skill and accuracy. So they're just resting on old solutions, whereas the adaptive are waking up and they tend to actually not just look at one option, diagnosing a problem, which 80% of business decisions only examine one option before moving forward.
Yeah,
They,
right. I
they,
know. I talk about that all the time as well. It's crazy how quick we jump to a conclusion and to into action without thinking. I do a bunch of exercises in some workshops that show people that they're simply cutting themselves off from the best solutions because, like you said earlier, the first solution isn't the best solution. So, yeah, so back to your adaptive experts. So they're asking more questions and taking more time in the solution finding or in the asking of questions and the analyzing different options and opportunities.
both in diagnosing the new situation and also in finding solutions. But it's also important that they, on average, test the potential solutions or diagnosis at least 4 different ways. So that often gets forgotten. We often think, oh, yes, we have to widen our frame and et cetera. which is difficult to do. But you also have to, I call it widen and deepen. And after scientists who call this kind of deliberation style progressive deepening, you want to take an option and then test it, evaluate in multiple different ways, even through something called negative testing, which is basically checking that your first assumption wasn't right. Anesthesiologist in the operating room who attributes this problem in breathing, the patient's breathing to X tube, should go back and double check. That's negative testing. So as one, Roger Martin, who's a great organizational management thinker, head of the Rotten School of Business in Toronto, says, the best experts, their resting state is not certainty. So they stay curious. And just going back to the idea of being wakeful, but then also going in deep, or in other words, having a car, so to speak, mind that's not just on one speed, but has multiple speeds and therefore is adaptable. I think one important little tip is the idea of cue words. This is something that's been borrowed from athletics. If you are in a stressful moment, it's very easy to leap to outcome thinking. Outcome thinking is, oh, is my presentation bombing? Or, oh, what's going to happen? I won't get my bonus, etc. Even studies show that at the very top of professional tennis players, I mean, the top, if the trophy is shown at the side of a court and in the very top tournaments, the best player in the match tends to struggle. Now, they might not always lose, but they struggle. They become the underdog because they're suddenly reward or outcome focused. So
You're
what you
focused on the outcome, right?
Use a cue word, such as I thought of, just be now, be in the now. Use the cue word to pull yourself back into the process, which means you're pulling yourself back into the moment. And then you're going to pick up on the nuances and perspectives. And again, those multiple options, those multiple diagnostic possibilities, et cetera. You're reverting back to the process, which is basically inhabiting the question and uncertainty, the productive uncertainty.
Right. I talk about that as well, cues, because they're so quick and easy, right? And we all can relate to something that we probably have used in the past that was a cue that helped us to get present. Or in parenting, in my book, I talk about a cue that I found from Love and Logic. And they say, I love you too much to argue. So in the heat of the moment, right, there's just that little phrase that I could say, or I can just say to myself, I love you too much to argue. And it sort of calms me down, brings me in the moment and connected to my kids directly or to my spouse. So, and I believe that's why I use the word reset in reset moments and reset mindset, because I believe that reset is a great cue word. Because words have energy and direction. And so if we choose the right words for us, it can immediately put us in the state that's going to, like you said, bring us back to the process and how we're showing up and how we want to be in that process.
Mm-hmm.
And I even had one for tennis. I used to play tennis and I used to get all stressed out. And it was just this point. I'm just focused on one point at a time. And that was the thing that I had to keep saying to myself to stop worrying about, oh, this game's getting ahead of me, or just play this point.
Right. No, and sports are always a metaphor for life. I heard a wonderful story about Jimmy Chin, the great filmmaker, Mount Everest climber. He's an incredible mountaineer. And he often takes novices out or people who are less highly skilled on the mountain than he is. And sometimes he climbs up the rock face, but then he just stops. And the new people are always kind of freaked out. They don't know why he's stopping. The trajectory is up. We've got to do. We've got to scale that mountain. And he says, no, I am stopping in order to assess my possibilities, in order to be uncertain for the moment and take stock of what's going on around me. So it's a form of inaction, seemingly, which is highly active. And that's, again, a great sum up of what uncertainty is for us.
Absolutely. And we have to do that dynamically on a regular basis to take that pause and take in around us and dynamically assess where we are, especially on the mountain. I think it's a great metaphor because weather changes really quickly. And one path that might have been a good path just an hour ago might not be the best path for the way that they want to take it. So you really do have to test where the wind is coming from and how your team is doing. Are they feeling good and strong and so forth? So that's a great metaphor as well, just to dynamically check in so that you're checking your options and then choosing the best option and the best way forward.
Right. And I think of that kind of pausing, that kind of deliberation, that kind of uncertainty as really an investment. And it's an investment in, again, getting the better answer. So when we are constantly rushing to answers, be able to fix it, as in patch it or get an answer, it's like cramming for the test. But if you really want to be in it for the long haul and get an answer that stands the test of time, or just includes other people's perspectives and therefore is far stronger, you need to harness uncertainty. Absolutely.
That's awesome. I'm loving this conversation. I could sit and talk to you all day. I love the references of the different neuroscience, and it sounds like you're deep into the reading and all the different science that's out there, which is fantastic. Where can people go to find more information about you? You know, we can always have you come back on the show, but we have little attention spans from people, so we'll call it a show right now.
Yes, my website, Maggie-Jackson.com, has reams of information, great podcast interviews, and press articles, etc. So lots of information there. My book is available just about everywhere, Uncertain, The Wisdom and Wonder of Being Unsure. And it's been named to multiple best books of the year. 2023, it came out in November. It's already well into its second printing. So I think people are hungry for a real meaty understanding of uncertainty today.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, well, thank you. This was a pleasure. Great.
Thank you all for being here. Now, you might have been uncertain coming in here whether you were going to get a really good set of nuggets and things to think about, but I'm pretty certain right now that you got a lot out of it. I want you to go and check out this book, because we are in times that require us to be agile, that require us to have a reset mindset and be able to be these dynamic question askers, so that we can really seek the best answers and not just the first answer, as Maggie brought to our attention. So, go and find out more about Maggie, and also check in with me, send me an email, let me know what you'd like to hear more of. I'd love to hear from you all. So my name is Penny Zenker, and this is Take Back Time. I'll see you in the next episode. Hey, thank you for spending this time with me. It really means a lot. If you're feeling a little off, distracted, overwhelmed, stuck, or just out of sync, remember that's your signal to reset. And that's all it takes, just recognizing one reset moment at a time. So stay tuned for more tips, tools, tricks, stories, strategies, all here on Time to Reset. We'll see you in the next episode.